or it's like a scarecrow in a wax museum. They're both like trying to achieve the same thing, but they cancel each other out the more that they're good at it. Another saying that I never really caught hold of was negligence is bliss. And I don't know exactly, but I think that it's aiming towards a comic relief, where it's comical if you have something thinking it's camouflaged, and then when you identify it, it's so scared that it just hightails it, out of Dodge, gets out of Dodge. I saw the one with a centipede, and then was turning my shoulders, and I didn't even see it, but it apparently saw I was turning towards it, and it jumped. I didn't know centipedes can jump. Even if you're an atheist and you believe no one's real, everything's a simulation, that simulation has letters inside of its genes. And why would you belittle literature in derogatory terms? That's all we've got. And so when you're mixing a silicon, it's a hybrid of like a plastic and a polymer. That's just the same as a thing that's good for you and then a thing that isn't. Well, if you put a whole bunch of fat cut in between, you're gonna be yearning for the fat. Just as the fat and silicon both allow conductivity, mainly the fat would allow you to have carbohydrate, allowing electric, you to be energized and electric. The short-lived is when the fuse is burned and you're winded because you're too fat from it. Just as the silicon is conductive, the more that it is cut with two different types of chemicals, that cutting is what makes it more conductive, which is scary because silicon isn't natural and neither does fat naturally grow in your body. If there is something in your body that mimics silicon, I think it would be fat, because it is flubber-like and close to being fake. You know how fake is plastic, silicon would be one of the best. And imagine if you had a machine that was articulating the DNA that you're trying to look for, but then it only popped up because it was running off of fat. So it would only be showing areas in your arteries that are corroded. That's where the fat was aiming, the aimer of the system the whole time, the machine system the whole time. And then you're so surprised that the silicon would be trying to imitate your muscle structure. And so the muscles, when they're ripping, they burn fat. And so you're so surprised that when you're using your silicon, the thing that is used in a machine to enhance the readings of fat, that you're so surprised that the opposite ends of your arteries, the places where the fat is less corrosive, is arcing. The muscular contortions where they're bulking up in the injured places because they have more muscles around them to try and overcompensate weak bone structure. And so the silicon is doubling as the arc over the arteries. And then that's the data that you're running with, the genes from that. What's the most bland blanket statement would be if you were trying to focus so hard to find out what's important about your body, and then you just took all the fat and tried to see how different it is from silicon. And then we're trying to figure out where's the DNA inside of that. And just incorporating it with things that people know and showing how blank it is in between. Not by a blanket statement, but a blanket bogus statement with like Jack and the Beanstalk. The woman who lived in a shoe and Rapunzel's hair. If you only saw those three things, and then everything else was just contorted by like that mirror on the wall, the mirror, who's the fairest one of the wall, if it was just making the entire land blank because it was one thing that it accidentally did on purpose. From the numerology would be great just to understand electrodynamics better and the interplay with it inside devices. Whereas the internet, trying to get a radio on a web page versus like a video on the web page, the video pops up a lot easier, but it's harder, and then you have to close the screen and try and tap it to make it play across when you close the window to have it keep playing the audio. And so fiddling with it and understanding where it's not getting in and then when it starts letting out, versus the same component of just the radio into the video. Well, why is it easier for one and then the other is more difficult? And simplifying all of these just to this most stupidest things like monkeys in a barrel or crab shoot, understanding the difference between the two and making that easier is something that is all allowed through numerology and making it a game like Sudoku. So at what length? As far and wide, as far as the eye can see, your bare eye blanks out. And to what depth? As far as the bottomless pit, because there's two things that can't be achieved, and you know that they'll cough up or give out. A perfect vacuum and a perfect black body. Those are two things that they can't happen, so you know that when you're going at those at length. Hey. So I only have like so much muscle in my body, and if it was all put into an endocrine or a the other one, you know, adrenochrome, and if it was utilized in between those two, it would only have to go into the part where it's hurt at most, the broken collarbone region. And so I think that's like achieving more muscle more than the other side is, because it has to overcompensate for a chicken wing, you know, when your shoulder blade sticks out the back, that's winging out, you know. And so when that adrenochrome or the other one, you know, endocrine would just be shifted back and forth, and then the bulk of the muscle would need more and more to equalize out. And then for equalizing out, any muscle grown would be in the default of the worst scenario, and so it would just get lopsided in order to acclimate it. Well, I'm questioning if the endocrine, if I'm right with all my calculations, which is shooting in the dark in a long shot, then it would ostensibly have the same characteristics as a vacuum, whereas the vacuum has nothing short of great stopping power. And I think that's what an endocrine would strive to achieve. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet. But with fentanyl and adrenochrome, it would actually act as such. And so I was back to square one. I know where I have to start. the plasma, early plasmas, as far back as anyone can go, even with the biggest telescope. And so the opposite of that would, of course, it had to be the black hole, because that is the exact opposite of the far back past. Whereas in the future, everything will get so spaced out that, unfortunately, you're either part of a black hole or slowly radiating to 0 Kelvin. So would you rather be within Schwarzschild radius and condense to a black hole, or peter into 0 Kelvin?